in London, quite an accomplished lawyer. He also talked about, we need to look at intelligence gathering. So it was a big faux pas that Canada did, and we trampled all over this person's rights. We do have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which I think, if not, you'll be getting into and whatnot. We'll maybe visit that at the end. But we're one of the very few countries that have this, one of the very first to have it enshrined in the Constitution. But we've also been a party at fault for saying we have these rights, but trampling over them. How's that? That's do you have any questions on that at all, anybody?
Zach did a quick little write-up in his summary about that case if you need to review it.
Who's Zach? Zach, where are you? Put your hand up.
Zach, me?
Yeah, Zach, you. Almost named my son Zachariah. He's Zachariah Zabian, ZZ. So tell me a little bit. Do you have anything to add to that? What do you think?
No, I think you covered it very well. I just think it was, I don't know, kind of a travesty how they trampled over his right.
And we do that once in a while, time to time. You're going to see that again. You might even see a little bit of that going on right now, maybe to a lesser extent, but it happened everywhere. It was every country did it. They would send them off somewhere where, they could turn their heads and let people torture them, get information. And you heard about all kinds of prisons around the world that were affiliated to, I'm just going to say the Americans for now. There were other countries involved too. Poland was involved. What's that small island called something San Diego that the U.S. has a military base on, but it happened everywhere, even in Guantanamo. But I'm just using the Americans as an example. They're not the only ones, though. Okay. So let's switch gears. Let's go over to today's chapter, and it's a combination of community policing and diversity. You've got a course on community policing, so a lot of stuff I'm going to go over with that aspect of it. I'll sort of touch upon, but after you're done this course with Liz, you're going to go back and see when you go forward too, you're going to see how diversity actually interconnects with all the things you do. Listen, we live in a diverse world right now, okay? Some of you might be first, second, third, fourth generation. I've got links back to New York to the 1900s. We all come from somewhere. I don't care whether you're English, whether you consider yourself Welsh, Scottish, just the British Isles. Even that in itself, people are so diverse. It's not a melting pot. So we're all immigrants at the end of the day when it comes to North America. We're not the first people here. You'll read more about, you haven't done First Nations yet, Liz?
No, it's starting after the midterm. Okay,
so you'll learn about First Nations, that we called them the First Nations because they were the first here, the Aboriginals. Aboriginals mean the first people, right? So, I mean, it's going to be a really wide topic. You'll learn some really fascinating and things that are going to make your head scratch and say, oh my God, I didn't realize we did that. But community policing is nothing new, nothing at all. All we're doing is going back to the way policing was done. We use the word community policing because the community is the police you're going to hear later, and the police is the community. It's interweaving the two together to help each other out. Think of it as your best friend or your partner, right? You both do things together to benefit each other. You're going to learn about some historical stuff. You're going to go back to the Carta Magna and stuff to the 17 and 1500s. But what we want to know is that if we look at it from the perspective of today, the police force is, a lot of them have actually grasped the concept of community policing, but still a lot of them have a lot of work to do. You hear a lot of services switching from police department to police service. You're going to learn that Edmonton, Ottawa, Peel are some of the services that are actually on the forefront of community policing.
So do you want to talk about the shift when we used to be called a police service to a police force? What did that entail? What was the focus?
Going back historically?
Pardon?
Going back historically, like in the past.
Yeah. So when we used to be a police force, and even changing the language to police service, what was the primary shift?
Yeah, so let me go back even before that very quickly. So back in the day, policing was not like what it is now, okay? We didn't have the cars, or as many. We didn't have the office in the car. We didn't have the communications as much as there were. Today, if you look in Woodstock, there's actually police walking the beat downtown. That's the way it always used to be. Your community, where you saw an officer, you know him or her, You'd know people by name. There wasn't that sort of shield or barrier between us and them. So eventually it got more modernized, more computerized. The car was introduced more heavily. It became, and it is the office. So the car became a rolling office. There's your one block between the two. When we call for help, we're not always calling somebody we know. So you're gonna look at the car, the technology, and the communication sort of started. The computer communication started to create that, I guess, segmentation between the community and the police. So basically, during that time, there was less and less contact with the community. Everything was police driven from the perspective of police. What's happened now when we've switched from the community police department concept to community policing, we're saying, you know what, we need to go back in the day when we engaged the community, when they were part of, when we knew them, when we knew what was happening. Instead of us assuming, we now need to go back and talk. Communities have changed, ethnicities have changed. There's a big drive, and there has been a big drive for the last while, especially with the OPP right now on the forefront, where they're getting of their gender diversity, cultural diversity, ethnic, religious. All right, our communities have changed. It's not Anglo-Saxon. You've talked about northwest, east, north, south, east, west immigration. There's more people coming from. They mainly used to come from Europe and Eastern Europe. Now it's Western Europe, and it's all over the world. So now you have community policing as a concept. You have community police liaison officers. You've got more of a link with the community. I guess at the end of the day, and we'll talk about the one, Liz, the one item you sent me the other day, which I found 2 pages of it, but you're going to find a whole, there's a.
Would you like me to pull that up right now, Fidel?
You do that? Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that actually. So if you recall back the use of force paradigm that they've gone over the use of force paradigm. It's a picture with a sort of like a bullseye that shows.
It's briefly been talked about. I'm pulling up the community policing wheel right now. You see it?
I started to screech. Yep. So this one with the 2 on it, Liz? Awesome.
Yep.
So they did this intentionally, drew it this way intentionally so you could understand it easier, because in the 20s or in the 2010 era, this was it was like actually like a puzzle. So it works in the same way. So when you look at the letter, the colors mean something too, from red all the way to green. Green being, the least, red being the worst, and you got think of it as a stoplight with blue in there, okay? But basically, what in this paradigm here, we're trying to go from more police or things being led by enforcement agencies, all the way down to. Can they see this where I've got my mouse here? Can you see my mouse rolling around there or no?
I can't, no.
Okay, that's good, no problem. So if you read these and read the next page, it's a really good self-explanatory. It's like basically, in the red, we talk about a high need for police assistance, right? Go back to the very top there, Liz, sorry. Yep. All the way, if we follow the whole paradigm all the way down and across to the green, where we look at more community engagement liaison, these are the 2 polar ends of the spectrum, as you could say. So basically, in the red part, we were talking about enforcement and crime suppression. Here, it's all driven by police through some kind of community mobilization that's self-directed from themselves, right? But as we peel back the layers, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to the very center where community and police. We're trying to say, okay, we act based upon assessing, we assess based upon planning with the community, and we work ourselves out that way. So that's what this whole paradigm is about, is how do we create those links? How do we look at who the community leaders are? How do we look at who the ethnic, cultural, religious leaders are and tap in them? I mean, about 3 months ago, one of our graduates, Hussein, what's his name again, Liz? Do you remember?
Mo
Hussein, actually. graduated about, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, but
Came in and
he's
spoke to the class recently.
okay. So his background, he's Lebanese and is a Muslim, okay? So during one of the Friday prayers here in Woodstock, he, along with another officer, went to the Friday prayers, which are held down at the church across from the Bank of Montreal and TD Bank. He basically is and has become, whether de facto or not, a liaison officer for that community, for the Middle Eastern community, for the Islamic community, because he knows what it's like. And people are, people will talk to people they trust at the end of the day when things get really bad. We have liaison with business groups. We have liaison with other cultural communities in the city, and this is what it's all about. This is what the basic community policing is. This is what this whole paradigm is about, is to link the two together and open doors both ways and have a frank communication and learn from each other. So instead of always having police-led safety initiatives, you have the community coming in and say, this is what we need. It talks about how people feel safe. And this goes back to probably a couple of Liz's sociology courses first semester they might have taken. Believe it or not, people feel more safe when they see police less. And the more they see police, sort of that safety net becomes less and less and less. So it talks about that as well. But at the end of the day, you help each other, you engage, ask the community what's going on. It's like you need to look at different perspectives. I don't know everything. I learn from my students and vice versa. Okay.
Mhm.
Any questions on this at all? I would read this in the next page to learn more about it, but this will be
Can
very.
you give another example, Fidel, of social development measures? So this is that inner wheel here. So the more we apply the social development measures, the less need for police presence. So you gave the one example with Mo being a community liaison. Can you think of any others?
There's a video I had in one of my classes about 2 years ago, and I think it was community policing, Lizzie. It might still be there. I'm not sure, but down in the States, and I forget where it was, whether it was in New Orleans or somewhere there, believe it or not, of all places, they have a specialized unit that does what they're supposed to do in the day-to-day stuff, but this officer, phenomenal officer, I can tell you, just when I go back and say to you, treat yourself the way you might be treated on your worst day, he actually, and the group, the task force that they have amongst themselves, they actually have links with the Mental Health Association and the Homeless Association in that community. So what they've done is that they've worked together to make sure people are safe, and that, you don't always need to arrest everybody that might do this or might do that based upon their social environment, what's going on. It's more of an education. What can we do? Where can I send you? These are the social safety nets, or the social, what the heck's the word I'm looking for? Organizations we can send you to. This is what we'll do. We're going to build that partnership, work together. Just like, in Woodstock, they have mental health association officers are riding with them, and not officers, workers, and also nurses,
Mobilization teams. Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So I've seen a few of them. They've done phenomenal work.
Yeah. That's a great example of something that we do in Woodstock. So for the mental health calls, a lot of police officers are now riding with social workers because they're better equipped to respond to it than police officers are. So it's
Now you're learning more.
utilizing people in the community with more skills than they might have for specialized.
And I think there'll be a chapter on that, Liz, in this course too, about mental health as well.
Okay.
About that.
So going back into our history, how we used to be very authoritative, and we're getting away from that now. Do you want to talk a little bit about the shift in what they're looking for in police officers now? We're not looking for the authoritative, heavy-handed, flash a badge, do what I say anymore.
All right. So think about this, okay? After every incident, you've got to pull out your notebook and write stuff on. You're going to escalate. We have limited financial resources now in the whole criminal justice system. What is the best? I'll give you an example right now. So when I was a little boy, I don't know how, 6 or 7, across from 7-Eleven on Dundas used to be a convenience store owned by an Italian guy, right? So I went in there. I came back out. My dad said, "Where the hell did you get that little piece of that little gum from? You got it from that store without paying for it? My dad dragged my butt back in there, made me apologize, and so on and so forth. So imagine that, imagine my dad being that officer. So instead of, dragging out, and let's assume it's something bigger, instead of dragging out and looking at the Ontario Provincial Offences book or something else, you know, maybe now it's time to, give people a break and educate. The first thing you learn, one of the first things you learn is that, hey, when looking at minors specifically, and Liz has taught this course with you already, what's the first thing we do when there's something going on? Do we go ahead and charge them, or do we go through a mirage of things first and then try to solve the problem in the lower level? And I guess this is what community policing is about. So if we think of a can you guys see my hand? Can you see what I'm, my end? Or can you see me?
They're saying yes.
Okay. This is a triangle, okay? This represents a police department, PD. At the very top is basically the chief, and it goes all the way down to the bottom of the triangle where we have the frontline officers, okay? In community policing, we turn that paradigm right around. Why? Since you are the officers, the frontline officers out there, you probably know better of what's going on than me as the chief sitting at the very top. So community policing, we also open up the communications up and down. We flatten that triangle so we have less layers. And at the end of the day, we are trying to teach officers to empower them more to be able to solve situations there when it happens. That can't always happen. There are times where you have to call your staff sergeant or somebody else to make decisions, but we want to try to create people that can think on their feet, that have all those skills, the social skills, the analytical skills and whatnot. Because if we can solve it down there, our report doesn't have to be as big. We don't need to charge. We don't need to put more people in the criminal justice system. We don't need to waste more money at the courts when there's more important things happening, right? So another part of community policing is empowering the frontline officer. That being said, with diversity and ethnicity, it's, it's like doctors. For you that go on to this, it's, to be the best officer is to learn more, keep learning. Learn about your ethnicities in your area. Learn, what? Even saying hi in a different language opens the door for you so much. You'll see that person smile. They're willing to talk to you more, understand their culture, understand their religion, ethnicity. This is such a big thing today. Canada is moving more and more. We're like we will become one of the most diverse countries in the world if we're not there yet. And we have to accept that. Some of us don't want to, which if you don't, you're in the wrong field. But it's something you're going to go through every day. First Nations, when they see that uniform on, it puts a big block right there. It just flies go everywhere, because when they see that uniform, it represents the government. And they haven't had the greatest relationship with governments over the past 300-400 years since actually the Royal Proclamation of 1763. So you need to know. First Nations people not look at you eye to eye. So a lot of you will probably say, well, they're lying. No, it's their culture. They perceive eye to eye as being confrontational. So the things they teach border security, stuff like that, they need to teach these other components so that based on where you're from or your background, you react differently. So you can't say because this person looks away, it's all of a sudden he's lying. No. In some Middle Eastern cultures, being a police officer is not an honorable job, because and I'm Middle Eastern, because where we come from, the authorities they are not, in countries like that, there's a lot of, money passing and stuff like that, reaching the palm, but they're also people that are they're authoritarians. They're happy to throw their weight around. And unfortunately, in the Middle East, you get a lot of that. And that's why if you meet somebody here in the Middle East and they've got that, my dad, when he sees a cop, the first thing that comes up is, I can see it in his head, like, what's going on? What's wrong? Something to do with me. And that's because of where they grew up. Because cops there, a lot of them, 9 out of 10, they're authoritarian Neanderthals as far as I'm concerned. So you need to understand, you need to know what other people from backgrounds, just know a little bit. Muslims pray on Muslims, not Muslim, because it's an S, not a Z, but they pray on Fridays. Jews are Saturday, Christians on Sunday. They're all, just little things like that. Like they're all believe in the same God. They're all the same Abraham and the Abrahamic faith, but just little things like that. My God, they will open up the oceans for you in the community. My cousin, who's an officer in London, his name is Ziad Zabin, works with one of our other graduates, George, and a few others actually. He's their liaison officer in the community there, right? I have another friend that's sort of liaison officer to the Italian community. But that's what they've done. Like I said, you'll see that Peel, Edmonton, Guelph actually is getting there too, and these are some of the forces. They're on the cutting edge of community policing because they've gone beyond that. Not just community policing, but they're integrating the whole community. They're looking at what is my community made up of, and how do I open the doors into that community? How's that, Liz?
That's perfect. Let's go back though and look at things that we do or have done throughout history that tarnish that. So let's talk about racial profiling. And one of the statistics that I read out to you in the podcast was stats show that the Black population in the GTA area is only 6.7%. But yet the Black involvement in an SIU investigation, so that's the most serious investigations, as you know, so something bad has happened, is 25.9%. And in police-related investigated shootings, they're 50%. So Fidel, tell me what you think about racial profiling, and even though we say we don't do it, these statistics are there, what's leading to it, how it's damaging to communities.
Now, remember a lot of the stuff here is my thoughts because of experiences I've had in the past. In the Maharar case, actually, some of the stuff I'm saying is because of firsthand personal knowledge. Okay, so I'm taking off my teacher's hat right now. Okay, so driving while Black is what a term you might hear. So again, I'm gonna link this back to some of Liz's sociology courses, Liz, you teach okay.
Just so you know, Fidel, we only have 10 minutes left. I just got the warning.
Okay, sorry. So basically, you're going to find that certain communities, have lower socioeconomic standing, more poverty, more crime. This leads to it too. But however, though, we are profiling, whether you like, studies have shown Ottawa, Toronto, other municipalities, studies have shown that they do profile. This happens everywhere, whether it be the Muslims, whether it be dark-skinned people, whether it be Blacks. It does happen quite a bit. And unfortunately, some of us are taught this way. Listen, we're all racist to a certain point. I'm sorry to say, deep down inside, if I push the right button, I can bring that out in you. But we have to let go, trust, go out and eat with somebody you don't know, break some bread. But it's still happening, unfortunately. And we're trying to do our best to get out of it. But at the end of the day, when, for lack of a term, when shit hits the fan, people start dividing and segmenting and pointing. Who are you going to blame for this? Who are you going to blame for that, right? It's humanity.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you guys remember when we did the tour of the Woodstock police station, she was saying, they asked her that, tell me a time or where you've prejudged or had, and she said, oh, I'm open to everyone's rights. And she said that was a bullshit answer is what they said. They said, dig deep down and tell me a time when you've prejudged somebody and what you've learned from it. Maybe you didn't act on it, but you're right, Fidel. We all have those thoughts somewhere.
Think about this. When's the last time you thought so-and-so about somebody and didn't even know them, but when you got them, you go, wow, was I ever wrong about this person? Boom.
What about the carding and the street checks and how that led to racial profiling? Do you want to talk about that or no?
Sure, yeah. So carding's been a big thing for the past decade, actually. And there's been, the previous Ontario government put an initiative forward to actually reduce that. I don't know. It seems like maybe Rob Ford might be peeling it back. But basically, when you're carding, what are you carding? What's your own personal bias that's making you card certain people, not others? Is it the car you see? Is it the person in the car that you see? Say, how are they driving an expensive car? Anyway, end of the day, if we go back to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, carding is actually an affront to that. But again, that goes back to your own prejudice as who you card and who you don't. Even if you're just carding to make sure at nighttime that things aren't going on, what are you doing it based upon? Somebody you know, somebody you don't know?
Yep.
It's a
And
big thing too.
yeah, the Human Rights Commission have said that if you're going to do that, you need to provide the person with the reasons why your information. What else, Fidel?
So basically, if you're carding, you need to justify everything you do. When you just like when you interview a youngster, you need to make sure it's taped that they understand. You need to ask them the question 7 ways so there's no misinterpretation. For you though, when you card,
Yeah.
regardless of how you feel, I'm going to assume you're all honest people and you wouldn't do anything negative or out of hatred, but you need to justify why you're doing it. Because let me tell you something right now. When the shit hits the fan sometime and things are done wrong, they're going to look for a scapegoat. They'll go, and if you're the sacrificial lamb because you didn't do things properly, they will put you and fry you. Justify everything you do and always assume it's going to be looked at by somebody else when you're doing this in
Yeah.
any instance.
So the Ontario Rights or Human Rights Commission said that if you're carding, the officer must be able to articulate the detailed reasons for the stop. So give them as much information as possible. Police officers must inform the individual that they are not required to remain in the presence of the officer, so they're free to leave. And then provide documentation to that person that gives them the officer's name, badge number, date, time, location of the stop, etc.
The more open you are, the more understanding they'll be, and they'll know that it's not. I mean, for those instances where it is needed, you need to follow what Liz has said to a T, what the law says to a T, and it makes you look better too, like you have nothing to hide. And
We're almost out of time. So is there any questions for Fidel before we log off? You can unmute and ask if there is. No, everyone's good. Can I get thumbs up if you're good? I see lots of.
Can I touch on something else quickly, Liz, before we leave, or no? Or do
If
you have
it might
first?
cut you off. I don't know. I got a time warning, but go ahead.
I got 5 minutes here. So listen. So in community policing, you're going to go back to Sir Robert Peel, who I call Saint Robert Peel. But he's the one that basically created community policing. He created 10 aspects, which are still in the I've taught this for 2 years. I've lost, but it's still in. When you look at the Ontario Police, oh my God, what's it called? All the 10 things are there, and it talks about use of force, being honest, engaging the public, so on and so forth. So you're going to read about that soon in Liz's class about how it started then. So community policing goes back way in England, hundreds of years ago, and you'll see that the way the British did it, the way England did it is different than the way, say, France did it, right? France sort of said, you know what? The king said, well, you know what? It's authoritarian. I want to do what I would do. The police are my tool. In England, they said, no, we need to create them separate from judiciary. They need to do A, B, C, D. They need to be open and trusted by the community, so on and so forth. So you're going to see that split, but community policing hundreds of years. And Sir Robert Peel is the one that set the template for that. I think that's all I have to say now. I miss teaching this class.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Well,
All
Liz,
right, thank you so much, Fidel.
Thanks, Liz.
And Fidel said that he could join us in a few weeks too when we start talking about First Nations and all of that interesting stuff.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care, guys and girls.
Bye.